Beverly Hills is more than just a city. It's greater than simply a municipality. What makes Beverly Hills so special is that it is a community with a capital C. We're connected. We belong together. And we need to remember that as we look to create a city of kindness, an initiative started by my friend Tom Tate when he was mayor of Anaheim, and we need to remember that. And while we're at it, let's also create a city of peace and love. Maybe we can start by looking out for each other. Or maybe we can even take Bamse's words to heart that the best way to get rid of an enemy is to make him a friend. That may not always be so easy in a world which has become so polarized, in which many feel if you're not with us, you're against us, in which people murder other people in cold blood because they're different. A couple of years ago, I took Vin to Mount Vernon for Father's Day. I asked the portrayer of the father of our country what he might tell future generations if he could magically return in, say, 240 years. Dean Melissa is acknowledged to be the foremost portrayer of George Washington. And the response of Melissa come Washington is as relevant today as it has ever been. Now that is a very theoretical question, young man, he said. But if I were to have one message for future generations, it would be this. The essence of America is e pluribus unum. The rest is commentary. Now go study it. Okay, so Dean Melissa is a cross between George Washington and Rabbi Hillel. And he was right. E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. Not out of one, many. Not out of many, many. Out of many, one. We may be a country of rugged individualism, but coming together and when necessary compromising is something we've always had in us. Far from being a dirty word, compromise is often the essence of democracy. Instead of finding reasons to hate each other, reasons to look down upon each other, reasons to divide ourselves, let us look to our differences as reasons to celebrate each other. Let us enrich ourselves and our children, not in spite of, but because of our differences. Give the French credit for their expression, vive la différence. And yes, give the Romans credit for e pluribus unum. But if we are to allow ourselves to broaden our horizons and expand our potentials, we need to practice not only kindness, but tolerance. In fact, I would argue that tolerance is a major component of true kindness. Maybe we can remember the power and importance of simple human decency within our community. Community is an extension of family and home. And it is precisely because local government is a reflection of community that when done right, it is the absolute best form of democracy. It's nonpartisan, it's closest to home. Home, that magical, comforting place where we belong, where we don't have to explain ourselves, where we can be ourselves, where we are safe, and where we can build a life together. Tonight is Nowruz, the Persian New Year, which represents renewal, new beginnings, and literally a new day. In the lobby, you can see the traditional Persian Haftzin table with all its symbolism. It is a new day. Nowruz Piruz to all of us. Tonight is also Purim, the joyous Jewish holiday which tells the tale of the Jews' redemption from destruction in ancient Persia. Throughout the world, tonight and tomorrow, Jews read the Megillah, the scroll of the book of Esther, which relates how our people were saved from the evil machinations of the arch-villain Haman. While Haman was foiled so many years ago, sadly, Jews throughout the world are still under constant threat. The disease of anti-Semitism, more bluntly and accurately, Jew hatred, is seeming to fester yet again less than 70 years after the end of World War II. Anti-Semitism is pathological, and while we can and must try to inoculate others against this evil disease, we must also do whatever we can to protect ourselves against its effects. As perhaps the only Jewish majority city outside of Israel, Beverly Hills has a special duty and role when it comes to combating anti-Semitism and other forms of racism and bigotry. Sadly, the Jewish people are perhaps the only group that continually needs to endure hate from both sides of the political spectrum. In Beverly Hills, we will continue to take resolute stands against anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry, including when it is masked as anti-Zionism, using such tactics as BDS, which attempt to single out Jews and delegitimize Israel. Just as Italian Americans, Mexican Americans, Norwegian Americans, and Somali Americans feel connected to their legacy countries, for many Jews in Beverly Hills, Israel is also home, a modern state in our ancestral homeland with many of the same issues and challenges as our other homes, including the U.S., and for myself, Sweden. Tonight on Purim, I'm happy to be able to proudly say, Am Yisrael Chai. Right now, our larger community is facing a different kind of threat, less obvious perhaps and non-lethal, but nonetheless a threat which potentially could destroy Mayberry forever. It's a threat not just to Beverly Hills, but to all other cities and communities in California, and it doesn't come from without. As Lincoln once noted, if destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. The serious existential threat which could destroy the fabric of our individual communities comes from within our own state, from those who were meant to serve us. The tradition upon reading the Megillah is that whenever the name of Haman is mentioned, the congregants make good use of noisemakers like this one here. They're known as groggers, thereby symbolically blotting out the name and memory of this villain. The threat to our communities today doesn't come from Haman. In fact, in Beverly Hills, the name Haman, spelled differently, is a name we honor, as Fred Haman, a Swiss Jew, was the father of Rodeo Drive. And in fact, it should probably be pointed out that the proper pronunciation of his name in German is Heimann. Today, the threat to our community comes from Sacramento politicians. In case you didn't read the recent edition of the San Francisco Chronicle, the state legislature has already proposed some 200 bills this session which would regulate the way we live, erode local control, and impose punitive one-size-fits-all rules on cities. So tonight on Purim, we're going to follow tradition. We're handing out some groggers, and each time you hear the words Sacramento politicians, make some noise like this. Thank you. Because I'm going to now tell you about the threat facing our community in 2019 and why it directly contradicts the notion of urban humanism, in which tolerance of a variety of lifestyle and housing choices is allowed to reflect the diversity of our state itself. I mentioned it last year, and in many ways, some of the bills coming from the state legislature are a war on single-family housing, which Sacramento politicians consider to be inherently racist and immoral. Effectively, they are attempting to use the housing affordability crisis to eliminate single-family zoning. It's a war on communities in an effort to impose one-size-fits-all measures which would financially benefit developers who don't like to play by the rules. Yet housing affordability and homelessness is just a smokescreen for these Sacramento politicians. One size almost never fits all. Here you can see a heat map of the areas which would be upzoned under the most pernicious of these bills, SB 50. As you can see, single-family zoning would be eliminated in literally the entire city. From Truesdale to the southwest, developers could build up to 8 stories of multifamily housing, essentially wherever they want. Since when is luxury housing in Beverly Hills going to solve homelessness? How can it create affordability? Or to put it another way, since when does building more Rolls-Royces reduce the price of Priuses? In fact, studies show that the addition of market-rate housing actually increases the need for affordable housing. So the kind of upzoning proposed by Sacramento politicians makes the affordable housing situation worse. Last year, I tweeted about a similar bill that it is, quote, a candidate for the Government Overreach Hall of Fame and represents a bizarre combination of Soviet-style master planning with raging crony capitalism. The bill is like the urban planning love child of Vladimir Putin and the Koch brothers, unquote. As French wit Alphonse Karr once noted, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But of course. Additionally, this kind of statutory upzoning is not only an urban planning disaster which could destroy the fabric of individual communities, it is also what is likely the largest wealth transfer from the public to the private sector in California history. Of course, that may be exactly the point of such legislation. The density fetishism of Sacramento politicians who invoke the covenants, redlining, and racism of the past has in and of itself a true element of irony. Because one might also make the compelling case that the levels of density advocated by those who would forcibly impose standards on cities have themselves been a component of the oppression of various classes of people, as slums and tenements generally have been located in, yes, the most densely populated parts of town. In fact, offering overcrowded tenement dwellers the choice of living in a single-family house could itself be seen as a remedy to the oppression of the slums rather than the elimination of single-family housing as a lifestyle choice. But if Sacramento politicians were really interested in creating affordable housing as opposed to simply enriching developers and potential donors, they would advocate a strong cocktail of measures, including empowering local jurisdictions to create rent stabilization ordinances that are appropriate to their communities, as we are doing, a reintroduction of redevelopment with significant funds devoted to affordable housing, robust inclusionary housing policies and nexus fees to fund affordable housing, reversing the alarming trend of income inequality, reversing growing job concentration, focusing on economic development in underserved areas, thereby furthering the cause of geographic equity, dealing with the tech oligarchs and stopping the rise of neo-feudalism, and perhaps most importantly, giving advantages to nonprofit affordable housing developers. Going forward, we need everything from single-family houses to the missing middle, which we have preserved in Beverly Hills, to ultra-dense urban areas, but it needs to be up to local communities to decide what is right for them. As an FYI for Sacramento politicians, more than 50% of our residents in Beverly Hills are renters, over 60% of our housing units are multifamily, and the density of our city is greater than Cleveland, Detroit, and Denver, including the estates of 90210. If you look just at 90211, where I live, and 90212, our density is greater than Philadelphia, Chicago, and Miami. And we are just one of 88 cities in LA County alone, each with its own unique DNA. Each one of these communities is home for its residents. Each one has something distinctive and special, and its residents care very much about their own communities. Housing and community should be a lifestyle choice, and in the spirit of urban humanism, we should look to ensure a variety of choices and living options for everyone, as people from all walks of life, all colors, all religions, and all ethnicities are as dynamic as our region itself. The dynamic nature of individuals and the communities they make up needs to be respected. Notwithstanding their ongoing scapegoating of cities, Sacramento politicians are where much, if not most, of the blame lies. Controlled by money and special interests, Sacramento politicians often do not have our individual communities' best interests at heart. Strengthening local control and protecting and empowering communities is now more important than ever. As discussed last year, the time may soon be coming in which we should look to stop these constant assaults on communities by Sacramento politicians. And not just in connection with zoning and housing, they are running amok seemingly in every which way possible. The California Constitution, quite frankly, needs to be amended to protect the rights of communities to self-determination and to reflect the principle of subsidiarity. The principle of subsidiarity means decisions should be made at the lowest competent level of government. As former Governor Brown has said, it's a clunky word, but it's a great concept. It really all comes down to this. Do you want more decisions made closer to home, or do you want more decisions made by Sacramento politicians? Human beings are endlessly dynamic with the sacrosanct right of self-definition. This right should also apply to communities which are made up of human beings connected with each other, like all of us in Beverly Hills. As a believer in community and urban humanism, it's my distinct conviction that what we need is less DC, less Sacramento, and more local decision-making right here at home. The irony is that while Sacramento politicians are just using the housing affordability crisis to help their donor friends and developer buddies and are not really addressing the affordability problem, we in Beverly Hills actually are taking actions to do what we can within the context of our built-out city, which has essentially had the same population for over half a century. We're currently working with a nonprofit affordable housing developer to create more affordable housing within our city, including units which would allow our seniors to age in place with dignity within their own community. We're working to develop and implement a robust inclusionary housing policy with meaningful nexus fees to be able to address all of the real impacts created by new market rate development, both residential and commercial. Our goal has to be to create a truly sustainable city for our children and their children. We should lead the way in fighting climate change, making use of green technology and serving as a model of a healthy, sustainable city. Of course, that should be the goal of each city and the entire region. It's critical that we all have an end game in mind, that we all look to our region and each city's version of its ideal height, size, and weight. It is critical for us all to remember that a spiral of unending growth is the very definition of unsustainability.